welcome to this week's podcast. I am, of course, your host, Marina Perry, and it is my absolute honor to finally have on the show Kerwin Ray, someone I've been wanting as a guest for a very long time, someone I admire immensely. And let me explain why. So Kerwin is first and foremost a businessman, a coach, and a mentor. He's an author and a speaker and all of these amazing things. But he's someone who has really stood out from the crowd as a master in the psychology of influence and human behavior. And that's something that you guys know I'm so wildly curious about myself. And he particularly does it in relationship to leadership, motivation, sales, marketing, personal transformation. He has numerous programs, which we're going to link to, which he supports people in: his accelerator program, Fast Growth Summit, Nail It to Scale It, his K2 Elite Mastermind. But what I really want to pick his brain about as a man and a partner and a father and a businessman is, one, balance, but also how to create breakthrough without losing yourself. So Kerwin, thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Marina, it's a pleasure. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. It was very kind.
Yeah. So first question I always ask every guest is, if there was an animal that best described your personality and way of being, what would it be and why?
Ooh, I'm a tiger. It's my Chinese star sign. So, and when you read the description for the tiger, I'm a wood tiger. It's very fitting. I guess you could say very much. I do like company, but I'm a very solitary animal. And I strive for a lot of justice. I fight for truth. And I know this sounds like I'm interviewing for a Superman movie. I'm someone that will fight for justice and fight for truth. And I don't mince my words, but can be very gentle at the same time.
Oh, that's beautiful. And talking about superheroes, the second question is, if you could have a superpower, which superpower would you choose and why?
Oh, look, I'm Tony Stark. I want to be, I should say, that was great. That says a lot about me.
I am, yeah.
I am Tony Stark through and through, because I think he embodies what I'd call the realistic superhero. You know, he doesn't have any super capabilities other than what he's done to, utilize what he has as a human, and then he's surrounded himself with a coat of armor, and gone and done some incredible things. But to give you something that is maybe an insight from my childhood, and I haven't shared this with many people, but the very first superhero that I fell in love with was actually He-Man. I don't know if you are old enough to remember He-Man and She-Ra.
Yes.
That's a little bit embarrassing, but there you
go. Not at all. In fact, I don't know if you've ever done those meditations that take you back through, the role models or the aspirational figures in your life. And when you map them through, you very clearly see what your soul was drawn to. So, for me, Princess Leia was one of the first. And when someone said why, I was like, well, because she saved the universe. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, there you go. That's not a big ask at all. So
I love that.
I love that too. So tell me then, you are known for fast growth businesses. What does that even mean?
Yeah, I think that's based on my my personality. I'm ADHD dyslexic, which for those who are uninitiated means that ADHD means I have an untapped amount of energy to be able to focus on multiple projects at any one time. Dyslexia enables me to see things that most people don't, to do things that most people can't, because they can't see what I can. It's a pattern recognition software. ADHD is an upgraded version of motivation. It just means that I need to ensure that I'm focusing on things that are in interest to me. But I discovered early on that I wasn't really good as an employee. I love working hard. I love being at task. I love being on purpose, but I hate being told what to do. I don't have a very good muscle for authority back then. I'm much better now. And when I got into business for myself, I failed the first few times quite spectacularly. But the reason is I don't know if most people can relate to this. Maybe you can. I know you've been very successful in your own right in business, in traditional business and other business as well. But I quit because I hated being told what to do. And then literally 6 weeks into my first business, I'm like, fuck, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing here. Someone needs to tell me what to do. But I didn't have the humility to ask because I didn't want to be told what to do. And then after a couple of failures, I worked out that I needed some help and I started asking for help. But what I realized was my superpower was I was really good at making things move quickly because that's what my brain needed in order to stay engaged. And the alternative was going back and taking a normal job, which it just wasn't an option. And so for me, I had to, by virtue of the way that my brain operates, make things move fast And as a natural consequence of doing things quickly and executing quickly and taking action quickly, you get results quickly. And by virtue of that, I snipped, I tucked, I hacked, I labbed, I essentially worked out. And I've been doing this now for over 21 years, like 21 years in business this year. And I just worked out a really strong method around processes, systems, strategies, and tactics, from a planning, marketing, sales, and scale perspective, and then combine that with what I'd call a fast growth psychology, which is, essentially a level of self-awareness and a level of understanding around what buttons need to be pushed in order to move quickly. And then I guess I'd worked out. I'm very process driven. I never work things out in isolation and go, oh, that was great. I'm always like, how did that happen? Okay, I got this result. What was it I did? I'm always breaking things down, and by virtue of the way I do things, I then, naturally and organically created framework, structures, systems, processes, and formulas that I could teach other people. And, that's my gift now. If you look at K to Elite, it's probably the greatest example of that. We have businesses from startup all the way through to 300 mil. And it's about 1 in 3, 1 in 4 will 2x to 10x in their first 2 to 3 years with us. And that's not and I'm not talking about taking a business from $100 to $1,000. I'm talking about taking businesses from $1 million to 10, from 2 to 20, from 5 to 50. And, it's something that we've found because I'm scientific. My dad was an economist. My mum was a clairvoyant and a psychic, but I also had entrepreneurial tendencies. I'm quite alternative, but I'm very scientific. And to me, scientific is it has to be replicatable. Otherwise it's philosophy. And there's a big distinction in the personal development industry where a lot of people think philosophy is science, and it's not. Philosophy might be something that people resonate with, and it resonates with a lot of people, but science is something that can be replicated regardless of who's using the process. And that to me is, what I'm just driven by results.
Yeah, so much of what you just said I loved. And one thing in particular, and anyone listening, if you know someone who's been diagnosed with ADHD or dyslexia, and everybody jokes that I've been non-diagnosed but have both. So this is fantastic. No, truly, I'm like, for sure I'm dyslexic. I can't spell for shit. Yeah, no, for sure.
It's a gift.
But I love the reframe that you gave. And so in all seriousness, because labels do limit us very often, but what I love about what you've done is you've really upgraded what society often would label as a disadvantageous situation and recognized it's actually your superpower, which is so often the case, right, with our unique gifts. So that was just beautifully done. I wanted to ask you though, given that you are obviously fast moving and you're thinking on the fly, and yet you love that it's replicatable and you've created the systems, have you had to pull in around you, people with different skills so that someone can do the mundane of like mapping that out? Or are you good with that as well?
I guess you could say I am probably my best and my worst client that I've ever had, because the best client you have is the one that, they take direction well, they do what you ask, they don't push back, although they push back intelligently where required in order to, test a theory. Whereas for me, it took me, and I'm not embarrassed to say this, because I think one of the most important traits in business is having the humility to admit where you've made mistakes. And I would say, without a shadow of doubt, I'd be far beyond where I am right now, if not for the fact it took me a long time to surround myself with better people. For the longest time, and it wasn't necessarily deliberate, but for the longest time, I was the smartest person in the room, and I was doing everything. And the only thing that I didn't actually learn how to do in business was the accounts and bookkeeping, because I look at a spreadsheet and it's like someone just opened a Word document. Imagine opening a Excel in Word. It's just going to look like gobbledygook. It's just not my thing. Whereas I've learned, and I forced myself to learn how to do every aspect of business, from the administration side through to the management side, events side, sales side, you name it, every single aspect. But what I realized was there were certain things that I was really good at that actually charged me up and gave me life. And there were certain things that I wasn't necessarily good at, but I could do, but it drained the life out of me. And we call those, or we call the other areas the native geniuses. And, when you play, and what I've discovered is the more I play in my native genius zone, the more effortless life is. And the more I try and do things that I'm not naturally good at, the harder life is. But I'm someone that I do things the hard way. I look at my son, I'm like, fuck, you're just like me. He loves to do things the hard way first. And, there was a great Thai monk that I used to go and get stomach massage from when I was doing fast. And she always used to say to me, Kerwin, stupid comes first. And it's so true, stupid comes first, ignorant comes first, unconscious comes first. But sometimes, there's a level of stupidity required with a sprinkle of awareness that then enables us to become smarter and develop, wisdom. And for me, it's only really been in the last 6 years I've started to put really incredible people. I've always had great people around me, don't get me wrong, and no offense to those people who've worked for me, up until 5-6 years ago. But in the last 5 or 6 years, specifically the last 4 years, and specifically the last 3 years, I've now got a C-suite of executives around me. I've got a CFO, I've got a CEO, COO, a CTO. In every area of the executive function, I have what I'd classify as, almost a public level C-suite executive. And for the longest time, I was trying to hack talent, just hire people with great attitudes and, train them what I knew. But what I was doing is I was just replicating what I knew, with great attitude. Whereas what you're saying is, sometimes there's an enormous amount, not sometimes, always there's an enormous amount of benefit in bringing in people who know more than you so that you're not only not having to teach them, you can maybe polish their diamond, but you're not providing the compression that created that diamond in the first place. So they're bringing a whole range of new minerals, whole range of new experiences to the table versus the ones that you're just giving them from your own.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes, if that element of that's so innate in, the true archetype of the entrepreneur, which is the lone wolf, right? Or you're like the lone tiger, someone who can be prepared to go it alone and leave the pack and think of a new way of doing it. If at the same time, that's that double-edged sword of, well, I'll do it all myself. I'll be the smartest and the strongest so I don't have to rely on someone.
Yeah.
And I love what you touched on there about humility. And I actually had a reminder of that for myself this morning. And that's still the part of my ego that I come up against, because as you said, so often when you're forging the way in your business, you are the decision maker, the top of the pile, the peak of the pyramid. And at some point though, that pyramid, and I'm asking a question in this reflection, do you feel that to really scale a business, it requires those legs going out and that C-suite coming in?
Absolutely.
Is that the difference between, someone who's, doing well, but really it's what's the word? Like a solopreneur with contractors kind of thing.
Self-employed. If I look at my clients, the ones that scale the fastest, they're the ones that put in management the quickest.
Yeah, right. That's the question I wanted. Yeah.
And that's, I guess, and it's so interesting. The irony in what I'm about to say is very thick. If someone comes and trains with me, whether it's at Nail It and Scale It, which is our 3-day immersion, or K2 Elite, which is a 1 to 6 year program, I find people, if someone walks into my room and grabs a microphone and says, "Oh, Kerwin, you don't understand, my business is different," I'll find them $500 on the spot that goes to a charity, Mentors International. Now, the reason I do that is because all businesses are exactly the same. The only things that are different is the products, the services, the people, and sometimes the systems and the processes, but fundamentally all businesses are exactly the same. But I used to look at my business, and again, this is me taking some of my own medicine here, it's a personal brand. So it was never going to be built to be sold. No one would never really understand as much about the business as I did because it was a personality-based business. And so I think for the longest time, I looked at my vehicle and my business not so much as an asset as I did a cash flow vehicle. I didn't look at it as a business asset. I looked at it as a cash flow vehicle. And the more I started to mature, and I say this all the time, I'm like a 46-year-old, 14-year-old. It's taken me a long time to grow up. But the more I mature, the more I start to see things that I never saw before. And one of the things that I have started to see is the asset nature of the personal brand business that I have. Although, theoretically, and I know it can be done because it has been done, it's not a business that will never necessarily ever be sold. It is a business that for the most part can be put under management and just allow me to focus on my genius. And that's been my focus for the last 5 years. It's been a de-risking strategy. So that I'm not doing every single aspect that I've been doing. And I can literally just, in some cases, just be a legitimate CEO, show up as a CEO, which is very different to showing up as an entrepreneur, in a fast growth, almost like startup environment, which this business has been for a very long time. But at the same time, the irony that I have within that is I'm the CEO and I'm the talent. And so... And don't get me wrong, I have a lot of talented people, but when you look at what we do, we're in the business of, personality. We're in the business of education, and I'm the talent that provides that. So I'm the CEO and the talent. And so I'm now, for the first time in 21 years, at a space where I'm now clearly defining my role as a CEO, but I'm also starting to clearly define my role as a talent. And that distinction is enabling me to get my life back, because for the longest time, like a lot of people do, and I'm sure you've been there, and do this yourself, where you just make an enormous, or in some cases a disproportionate amount of sacrifices in order to grow your business, fulfill your, and for me, it's never been, and I won't say never, for at least the last 7-8 years, maybe more. No, it's probably actually since probably about 2008. It wasn't until I started making lots of money and then realizing, because and this is just a little bit of a backstory here. My backstory is I didn't grow up with a lot of money. And so therefore, there's an old saying, voids breed values. And I thought that a lot of my unhappiness was born from the fact that I didn't have a lot of money. And so once I started to make money, I thought, well, as soon as I start making lots of money, then my life will be fantastic. And then sure enough, as I started to make lots of money, my life didn't necessarily change. My mindset didn't necessarily change in the context of what I called happiness. And I was like, shit, I've got all this money. I'm still not happy. Maybe I need sports cars. And so I started buying sports cars. Still didn't, it filled the gap. I found that it was like the two week principle. Like I'd buy a car and then for 2 weeks I'd be like, yes, this is what's been missing from my life. And then at the end of 2 weeks I'd be like, fuck, I'm miserable again. And then I'd buy another car and be like, yes, it was clearly just the paint color that I needed that was different this time. And then 2 weeks later it was back to normal. And then it was an apartment. Then it was a house on the water. And then it was dating, a model girlfriend. But what I found is after 2 weeks of each one of those things, I came back to this realization, fuck, I'm just still empty as ever. And that's when I embarked on a personal journey going inward. And once I did the work, and I'm continuing, and it'll be a lifelong journey for me to do that work, I reached a point where I realized, okay, when you stop doing what you do for money and you start doing what you do for purpose, all of a sudden you are filled with this energy that doesn't require you to read a book in order to get motivated, to get into state in order to get motivated. I wake up and I can fucking go against anything, anyone, any situation, any circumstance, any illness, any situation, any time, any weather, and do what needs to be done because I'm driven by something that is inside me, not outside of me. And so for the longest time now, that's been I guess you could say my motive is to do what I do for purpose, not necessarily for money. And I forget where I was going with this question because you did ask me a very specific question.
It's all perfect actually, because I'm a sovereignty coach, and this is exactly what I teach: is this inner journey and through the school of growth. I want to talk to you though about a couple of things you just said, but before I get to them, which is the personal brand versus, because my strategy, to be honest, has always been to build the brand, instead of around the personal. And as a result, and I don't know if it's even just this hiding, which so many coaches do is hiding. They're not great at necessarily projecting themselves out there, but I've always felt more comfortable creating an entity that has a living, breathing soul and getting behind it and pushing it. Yep. Whether it's Pure, the health clubs, or the School of Growth, or whatever else. And then I still do my stuff in them, but I've noticed other people are just brilliant with personal brands. And it's interesting, as you mentioned, some being more saleable or not. I want to pause that for a second though. I just want to ask you, because you are, arguably one of Australia's most successful business strategists, business coaches, and performance coaches, I suppose. What is success to you now then? Like, obviously you've moved along, the journey, and as so many of us do, we end up going inwards, but I just would love to hear that from your mouth. What is success to you today, Kerwin?
Looking at my son and seeing how polite he is, how kind he is, how loving he is, how humble he can be. Like to me, I don't know, I've been through the phases of success was extrinsic, as we already discussed. It was money. Then I got that and realized, it didn't make a jack bit of difference to me. And then I went through the phase of success is about being happy, and even positive psychology tells us, and this is so interesting, and there's still a lot of people that don't know this. Based on the work of Martin Seligman, what we've discovered is people who are already happy are 78% more likely to create success in whatever endeavor that they are pursuing. But most people are pursuing a business, a career, a brand because they hope once they achieve a certain status, then they'll be happy. And so I've been very lucky. I've been through a lot, and all through it, I've been able to maintain a perspective of balance, to be able to see both the good in situations and the bad. And so for me, I think that helped me develop an incredible level or a basis for what I would call genuine success. Because to me, there's a level of happiness that is sometimes delusional, where we convince ourselves that we're happy and we only look at the good things in life and we pretend all the bad things don't exist. Whereas the greatest definition of love that I've ever heard is the synthesis of complementary opposites seen in synchronicity. And that's
pause and say that again, because the energy of it, I'm like a hell yes to, but I just want to hear the words again one more time.
The synthesis of complementary opposites seen in synchronicity. And
Yes.
that's to me is true love, and that's true
Yes.
happiness. And I'm not talking about Disneyland love. I'm talking about being able to see, because I've had some incredible, growth opportunities in my life, and some incredible things that most people would label as, and labels and situations and events where people go, oh my God, that's really bad. And you go, yeah, it is, but it's also really good.
Yes.
And
Yeah, the
I
paradox exists. I mean, the more you seek truth, the more you find the paradox, right?
the balance exists. We live in a dual universe. Our reality at the fundamental atomic level is bound together between positive and negative, charges that ultimately vibrate at a specific rate of frequency that give us this appearance of mass. But every expression above that into the Newtonian space is in balance. But it's the human psychology that sees things in balance that causes the unhappiness that in most cases we experience in the world. And the flux of happy then sad, happy then sad. Whereas if we can find that balance of neutral, and neutral, is where you live in hindsight, because most people, if a bad event happens, they'll go, oh my God, this is the worst thing in the world. And then 6 years later, 6 months later, they look back and go, oh, you know what, maybe that wasn't the worst thing in the world, because if not for that, they start to connect all the dots. Whereas something that I've developed, and I got to say thanks to a mate of mine, John D. Martini, for this. He taught me this about 15 years ago, was to really bring hindsight in fast. And when something happens that's good, you go, right, what's the deficit of that? What's the downside of that? So you don't get too elated. You never get too elated. You never celebrate too much. And if something bad happens, you go, right, what's the benefit of this? And to me, I don't know, when he told me that, my spectrum brain just picked it up and went, right, I can do that. I can process that really easily. And so for me, happiness is being able to see the balance. And to me, I feel like I've achieved a level of consistency and duration where I've been able to maintain what I would call a very healthy perspective in life, to the point now where I've gone, okay, well, what does success now mean for me? Because I won't say I've mastered happiness, but I've got to a level where happiness is present in my life on a regular basis. It's every day. And that's why I now look at my son and I go, because I look at presence as happiness, but I'm also looking at as legacy as, okay, once my presence ends, what am I going to leave behind? And that's where I look at my son and I go, yeah, wow, look out world, because I'm packaging up something that is when if and when I go, it's very special. And to me, that is just looking at him is, there's not many things outside of looking into his eyes and seeing the innocence and the sweetness that comes back that top success for me at the moment.
Yeah, I get the sense of that, and I think that, I don't know if you've noticed it, but this next generation, a lot of the things that, because morphic fields exist, right? Like we know this,
Absolutely.
that energetically the next generation is already wiser just by being, born in the time and era that they're born. But I know that the world is in a crazy state at the moment, and we could take a very pessimistic view if we wanted to, as to where we're going and what's happening. But I look at my children and I look at, the even just younger generations who are, approaching adulthood, and I have deep faith in those generations, things that we had to fight to learn as being real.
It's interesting because I hear a lot of people say the same thing, like the world's in a crazy place right now, and there's a lot to be pessimistic. I disagree completely. I think we've never been more primed for mass awakening than we have right now. And, this has gone back 2,500 years ago. Buddha said himself, the greater the pain, the greater the awakening. And what we're experiencing right now is collective pain, collective fear. And I don't see that as a bad thing, because I look at my own life and I go, where have I had the greatest growth? From the greatest levels of pain have created the greatest transformations in my life. The greatest levels of fear have created the greatest levels of personal confrontation, which has also led to the greatest levels of transformation. So I think right now we're not primed on the pit of catastrophe. I think we're primed on the precipice of what I'd consider to be one of the greatest leaps in evolution, of conscious evolution, that this civilization has seen this side of the last extinction event.
I would agree. And I think certain people listening would be 100% on board with us on that. And then other people
and others would be like, you're
crazy.
You're out of your mind.
You're crazy.
You're on crack, man.
And that's okay, because there's the duality right there.
Exactly.
So you have had 6 near-death experiences. True?
7. I've had 7, but there's
you just
more.
racked one up recently. Maybe your spirit animal should have been the cat, Kerwin.
Yeah, well, tiger's a cat.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So, what's that about?
Like I said, I'm a late bloomer, and I'm a slow learner. And when I say stupid comes first, I am the living example of that. And I'm very grateful because I've experienced mortality from a very early age. I've experienced a disproportionate level of mortality, not just extrinsically, but also in terms of my own mortality on a disproportionate amount of times. And, Napoleon Hill, there's been many great men, many great women who have said, that some of the greatest awakeners and some of the greatest contexts for transformation are, births, marriages, and deaths. And I have only had one marriage. So touch wood, that was a great awakening for me. I've had one child, and that was an enormous evolution for me. Like, I went through probably one of the greatest levels of concentrated growth and transformation in my life. But I feel very grateful for having tasted death, 7 odd times, in a range of different scenarios, in a range of different contexts. One of which I actually had a genuine NDE where I had the stroke in 2009, and I got given some incredible insights and downloads. But every single time that it's happened to me, specifically more in the later, because it took me quite a few more mortality events to wake up. But the last couple of mortality events have been ones that have really been like cherries on top. So
yeah. Well, I mean, death is birth, isn't it? Because it's energy can't be destroyed.
Total rebirth.
Or created. So yeah, 100%. And I agree with what you said earlier, that our breakdowns are so often our breakthroughs. And I think the only reason anyone would view the present moment in our history in a pessimistic way is because they're failing to be in touch with the reality that fear of mortality that's very alive right now, that's an opportunity for us to seize life in a whole far deeper or more encompassing way. And of course, we always have choice and free will. That's the nature of this dimension. But it is an interesting perspective to my daughter, just in the last 6 weeks.
How many kids have you got? Just out of
I
curiosity.
only have two.
How old?
But they keep me busy.
I know one's just turned 13. I just saw that on Instagram.
Yeah, she just turned 13, and it's the 13-year-old, and Bayla is 10. But my 13-year-old just had a bleed on her brain, so essentially a stroke, similar to what you do. Yeah, and she's not yet scheduled, but we'll be having brain surgery to remove it. So as a parent, it's the mortality of someone other than yourself is actually incredibly.
You bring up something really strong here.
Yeah, it's very, because powerlessness is one of my greatest fears, right? So for me to be powerless to take care of one of the two things that I know that are mine to really take care of has been very interesting to be in the process of, and to notice just what happens. And at the same time as this was all going down, we had a woman inside the health club. In 20 years, Kerwin, we have never had this happen. Literally, cardiac arrest, dropped dead, and had to be resuscitated, was pronounced dead and resuscitated. And you just go through those moments where the fragility of our mortality. Yeah. So, I mean, I've never had a near-death experience myself, touch wood, but just recently I've just been like, it's all a gift. You know how it just deepens. Yeah. I mean, I kind of live in that state anyway, but on a whole nother level, the people you love, hold them close. The things we even get to witness with these eyes and hear with these ears, it's such a gift.
Well, you bring up something really close to my heart because, I'm someone that has pursued death, and Jason De Silva would call it death practice. Like, I've pursued death in a range of different ways, in a range of different activities. I used to be an adrenaline junkie. I did over 200 skydives in a 12-month period. I had, a couple of very, very near misses with skydiving. I've embarked on a range of different experiences that have brought me very close to my own chosen mortality. And what was interesting is I just was chasing the feeling of not being afraid. And I was chasing it by finding that the more things I did that I thought would kill me, when I'd get to the other side, the less fear I carried. But what was interesting, I literally got to the point, Marina, where I thought, I've got to that level. And you never become absent of fear. The term fearless is actually a really appropriate term because it's just less fear. And your response to that less fear becomes, more resilient. But I literally felt like I got to the point where I developed a level of fearlessness to the point where I just didn't have fear in my life. It wasn't something that was present. Even when I had my stroke, because that was in 2009, I was ready to go. And not because, oh my God, take me. I was like, man, I've lived 5 lives. If I go today, there is no fucking shame in that. I've lived. So you know what? If it's my time, hallelujah, I'm coming with open arms. You can take me. I'm yours. And so for me, I'd kind of achieved this space of in absolute appreciation and gratitude for the life that I'd lived. And so if today was going to be my last day, I was like, yeah, I'm good. Every day I was like, yep, if today's my day, I'm good. And then along comes my son and it all fucked all that shit. Sorry, I'm not supposed to swear. I'm sure. Am I allowed to swear?
It's
on your
all good.
podcast?
Yeah.
Okay, I just fucked that shit right up because all of a sudden I developed attachment again.
Yeah.
Because I'd spent an enormous amount of time detaching from possessions, from money, from people, from situations, circumstances, and even myself, even going through self-death, ego death. And then all of a sudden this little being comes along that I love more than any other thing or experience that I've ever loved in my entire life. And now I'm like, fuck, I don't want to lose this. And then all of a sudden my fear of death crept back in and my fear of loss crept back in. And it was giving me the whole next layer of work to do. And so with the position right now, I'm sending so much love and good vibes to your daughter right now because,
Thank you.
I'm one of these people that whenever I hear something, I'm very, I just can't not put myself in someone else's shoes. I feel you're very similar that way. And, to be put in that situation, first of all, you're showing an immense amount of courage. But secondly, I'm sending an enormous amount of love and healing towards that little girl right now. And I'm sure she's going to be fine.
And we'll take all the prayers and we'll take all the good juju. Yeah, that's all welcome. I've said for many, many years in my own learnings that our attachments are our Achilles, that's where our weak spots are. And I agree with you. Getting to those edges of where we feel the fear you've been through divorce, I've been through divorce, I've been through near financial ruin as a result of it. And you learn your capacity to deal with what others might find stressful expands, your capacity expands, and things that other people would stress about and not be able to sleep through, you just sleep like a baby. So, I'm not someone who's, interestingly, you kind of addressed your fear on a physical level. Whereas I'm someone who's, my physical body is so revered by me that I don't ever want to be injured. So I tend to be very cautious, not in many areas of life, but I don't want to break my body, but I look at these people, like my partner is a big wave surfer and you jumping out of a plane 200 times, I'm like, you're crazy, but at the same time, I get the principle of, if you push your edges out, then you've got more freedom without fear. So I get it in theory, but I still think you're crazy. So, okay, what I wanted to know, and getting back to kind of business for a second, is, I coach people to become coaches. So, teaching people the change work tools to become coaches. And the question I have is that I wanted to really ask you today is one that's very specific to them. So they're in an industry that is massively growing, but it also at the same time can feel very saturated. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're in a coaching space, which, I would argue the world needs so much of right now, because
big time.
There's never been a better time than now to be a coach, because the world is open to it. We understand what it is, and we need the transformation. Yet, it's easy to buy into the story that, well, it's already being done. Someone's already doing it. So my question, if we can cut to the chase, is, you're a marketing and a sales, genius. What would you say to these coaches who have wonderful skills that can help people, but they're like, how do I cut through the market? How do I call in my clients? Like, I know I got my avatar and I know I need my niche, but actually, like in the real bloody world, how do I get out there and have someone find me so I can actually do the service that I'm here to do?
Look, I think that opens a great question, and I could talk philosophy or I can talk strategy and tactics, and I think I'll switch to some strategy and tactics. Yeah. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Okay. I think there's been a massive transition since 2006 in the way that the world communicates as a result of Facebook and the birth of, mainstream social media. MySpace did its job in terms of, creating aspects of social environments, but Facebook really kind of kicked that into a whole nother gear in terms of connecting people through, digital space from a communications perspective. And what's happened now is we've moved from a traditional communications and a traditional marketing environment into a social media and a social marketing environment. But what a lot of people are doing is they're stuck in traditional context. And what I mean by that, and, I'm going to assume, you've been around long enough to have seen the evolution of newspapers, magazine, other forms of print, and also their demise, as I have, right? Mm-hmm. And what has happened is if you look at the way that traditional media was conducted and funded, it was funded through advertising, okay, as is social media. Social media is also funded through advertising. So the commercial structure and the commercial intent is very much the same, but the communication strategy is completely different. Mm-hmm. If you look at traditional marketing or traditional media, so radio, TV, any form of print, billboards, etc., that was governed by, I'd say about 90% of advertisers were governed by a modality called direct response marketing. You know, there was maybe 10% of marketers that could play in what would be considered to be the social brand building space, whereby they had enough money to take out full page ads and just put pictures on them in order to create a brand association. And, you know, some of the best companies that did that, I'll give you an example of, because I'm just going to drop a keyword right now in your Google. And, you know, Google is nothing more than, you know, a physical representation of how our brain works. We are all Google. And I'll demonstrate that, because what our goal is our goal is to create a top of mind authority position where we become the number one slot, the number one result in people's minds when they drop or type in a keyword into our communication or our conversation chain. So I'm going to give you a keyword or a keyword phrase. Soft drink. What's the first thing you think of?
Coca-Cola.
Fast food.
McDonald's.
And they were two really well socially marketed businesses, because if you look at their marketing was predominantly, it wasn't direct response, it was social marketing. They used social context, they used social environments, they used social structures and networks as a way to market their products, to create an association at a social level between a product, a service, and a keyword and phrase and context and situation. You go onto the beach, okay, or you're looking for a quick meal, you want to feel refreshed, or you want to feel fed quickly. They were your first obvious choices, not because they're the best choice, but because they marketed to you with enough consistency and frequency whereby it just automatically became your number one search result. And that's what's called the mere exposure effect. Now, the mere exposure effect is a psychological phenomena whereby people tend to develop a preference for things once they become familiar with them. In social psychology, it's also called the familiarity principle. Now, there's no accident that Mark Zuckerberg studied social psychology and developed Facebook. Facebook is fundamentally driven by social psychological concepts and fundamentals, and one of the most important fundamentals is the mere exposure effect, and understanding that people need to be exposed to a business, a product, a service, a brand multiple times before there is a level of a trigger that is initiated at a psychological level where someone will feel compelled not to buy, but to engage with that product or service either through conversation or through touch. You know, whether or visiting the website. Now, back in 2005, the average consumer needed to be exposed to a business, product, service, or brand 5.4 times before that was triggered. 2012, it was 12.8. By 2019, it was 20 exposures were required in order to build that same brand association and brand familiarity, or what we call brand trust. Okay, and you're still not at the level where you're owning the keywords yet, but you now got levels of familiarity. And you probably know yourself that you need to see things a few times before you feel comfortable to reach out. Sometimes we need to meet someone a few times before we feel comfortable to talk to them, because we need to build that level of familiarity. But what we are up against now is people are using traditional direct response, because direct response is all based on that 90% of people that didn't have the budgets to be able to build social context and do social marketing. And social marketing is what I would refer to as a social brand building. You know, where you're creating a context and a situation and you're pairing it with your product or service. The other 90% of people, they had to run ads that were either half page, quarter page, you know, classified, or in some cases full page, but they were doing direct offers. Buy my stuff now. Be in the first 50. You know, if you buy now, you will get this, you will get that. And so we learnt this methodology whereby we had to create what is referred to as instant influence, whereby we moved the market very quickly to want to buy our products and services by making offers that were too good to refuse.
Like a call to action, you mean?
Call to action. Yep. Direct response is all based on open, middle, close. It's basically a short, sharp sales process. How do you get someone's attention? You know, when you put a headline on anything, you literally have 0.3 of a second to get someone's attention. And I've had campaigns when I used to do traditional media, because I was a copywriter for a very long time, and I could have ad campaigns that would have like a full page, half page, quarter page ad, and all I would do is change the headline, and I could increase the response rate by about 1,000% just by changing the headline, because the headline determines what people read. You know, and if you're flicking through a newspaper, what determines whether or not you read that article? Because you don't read every article. You look at the headlines, and the headlines will determine what you read. Okay, and and again, that's still how people's brains operate. They're just not flicking through the newspaper, they're scrolling through the feed. Okay, so headlines are very important, but what we've got to understand, direct response is an offensive concept in a social environment. And let me explain why. Because let's say you go to a networking event. Do you expect, if you go to a networking event, do you expect people to try and ask for your business card and market their products and services to you?
No.
At a networking event, of course you do, right?
Oh, at a networking event,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, because someone's going to go to a networking event and they want to meet people, and they're trying to build their business networks, and they're maybe not going to you're not going to be expected to direct sell, but you're going to expect to build relationships that are going to lead to some form of a marketing transaction, right?
Yep.
But let's say you have a birthday party, and I'm going to assume, you probably had your 31st birthday party not that long ago, and, you invited 50 people along. And, from those 50 people, let's say 49 all showed up with a bunch of flowers, a bottle of wine, and a really nice and thoughtful gift. But one person showed up with a sandwich board with a big headline on it, okay, and this big offer and a fistful of brochures, and they walked around and they pitched every single person at your birthday party. Would you invite that person to you? Exactly. You'd be like, get the fuck out of here, mate. What are you doing? And it would be socially inappropriate. It would be literally situationally inappropriate. You would be like, dude, you just don't do that here. It's my birthday party. What are you doing? But that's what most people are doing when it comes to the use of social media. They're using traditional marketing concepts in a social context, whereby they're trying to market their product, market their service, sell their product, when they should be trying to do what social people do, which is engage, have conversations. And this is where we go from being in a direct response philosophy or a direct response context to what I call utility philosophy or utility context. Now, when I say the word utility, Marina, what do you think of? What does utility do?
I think of electricity and power.
It provides a service.
I think of Monopoly. I'm that old.
Easy, Tiger. Utility is, when you look at the word utility, it's helpful. It's of service. Yeah. And so what we've got to understand is we're not moving from a non-marketing environment. We've got to get 20 exposures. How do we get 20 consumptions and exposures? Well, first of all, don't piss people off by trying to market to them. Because, I'm sure, how many times have you seen the same ad on Facebook and you don't get inspired to respond? You're like, fuck, why are you showing me this ad? And you get annoyed. And so we now deal with social sentiment. And so we've got to understand if we market the wrong way in a social context, because right now people aren't reading newspapers, they're not watching TVs, okay? They're not using traditional media methods, they're using social methods. But if you're using traditional strategies in social environments, you're not actually building positive association, you're building a negative sentiment. And so how do you cut through? First of all, you start producing content that doesn't try and market, that doesn't try and sell, that actually just solves a fucking problem. Because if you look at my content, and I know, and I don't say this with a level of arrogance, I say this with a level of what I believe is humility and understanding and visibility of who's in the market. There's very few marketers, or there's no coaches in Australia that produce the level of content. I have 18 people in my media team. I've got 7, 8 filmmakers that are cutting content, literally 6 days a week, cutting content just to produce for all a range of platforms. So we produce more content than almost any other business coach that I know in Australia, if not on the planet, maybe bar 1 or 2 people. And what's interesting is if you go to my Facebook right now, look at all my videos, how many calls to actions do you see? How many offers do you see? How many, sales strategies or links to my website to buy my shit now? You don't see it. Why? Because 99.999999 recurring of my content has no call to action. It has no proposition. It has no offer. Okay, there's nothing to buy. It's just me solving problems. I'm solving.
This whole know, like, trust. They know you, they like you, and they trust you around this sphere of influence that you're saying you just provide so much value around it that when they think business, they think Kerwin. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Well, that's the ultimate. That's the end goal. But that's down the line. And that's why mere exposure effect really reflects 20 exposures. That can take up to 12 months to get 20 exposures. But if you do it the right way, you can get it in 2 weeks. And how do you do that? You create content that people want to consume. Why? Because you're solving really relevant problems. Okay, and you're not asking for things. You're actually demonstrating a level of, authority and expertise by being able to solve people's problems. And as a natural consequence, people want to consume the content. And here's the second thing you've got to understand in a social context. A lead in a social environment is not the same as a lead in a traditional marketing environment. In a traditional marketing environment, I'll ask you, what was old school marketing? What was a lead?
Well, like a sale opportunity.
Yeah, so it was data. Yeah. So it was first name, email address, and maybe mobile phone number. And if we were looking for extra credit for data collection, it would be a postal address as well. But that was what was considered a lead. Now, what was our goal? We get a lead to do what? To market to them. And what's the goal of marketing to someone? Because here's what we know. If we go to a general audience and we market, 98% of people who respond aren't going to buy. 2% will buy. So if we only capture the data of the 2% who buy, we've just missed and we've lost the financial opportunity and the investment of the other 98 people who responded. Okay, so our goal is if 100 people respond to our ad, we need to, in old school direct marketing psychology, we need to be collecting data for every single response. Why? Because only 2 people are going to buy, and if we don't collect the other 98, then we've just lost all of our money. Whereas if we collect the other 98, now we can do what's called remarket to those people. because we know over a period of time they may not be ready to buy straight away, but they will be ready to buy at some point down the line. But what the data gave us is the data gave us the capability to keep communicating with them in the hope that we would at some point engage in what? A conversation, because the conversation is what leads to the sale. Now, moving to the social world, you didn't even have to generate a lead to start a conversation. Conversations are started on threads. Conversations are started on DMs. And here's the shocking statistic, Marina. 89% of comments and direct messages on Facebook to business pages go unresponded to. Imagine having a shop, right? Imagine having a restaurant and someone walks in and to your restaurant and goes, "Oh, can you tell me about the salmon?" And you just turn around and walk away. Or someone walks into your shop and says, "Oh, that's a nice dress," and you literally push them out the door and you close the door, or you just turn all the lights off and walk out the back. That's the equivalent of what most people are doing, because they don't understand. And this is a write it down. Conversation is the new lead. Okay, once upon a time, we had to spend money to start the conversation. We had to spend money to gather data in order to start a conversation. Now we have the opportunity, because people will talk to us. If we produce good content, people go, "Oh, that's great. Oh, I like the look of that. Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, I can relate to that. What's that?" That's a comment. And if someone walks up to your party and goes, "Oh, I really like your hat," do you just ignore them? No, you fucking talk. Otherwise it's considered to be socially rude, or that person's a bit abrupt, or that person's a bit cold. And now, in the context of social, if we have a conversation, that increases the likelihood of data collection. Why? Because we're now creating a point of relativity. We've created a relationship. And now they're about 8 to 16 times more likely to convert to data if we ask them, if we've already given them value and started a conversation. So, back to the question that you asked, how do we cut through? First of all, and I say this with a lot of love, everybody needs to get the fuck over themselves and realize that people who view video are 1.81 times more likely to buy than a non-viewer. That's 181%, just because they watched a video. And so for those people listening and I go, "Oh, I'd love to do video, but I have a face for radio." It's like, well, get over it. Get over yourself. Okay, stop putting the emphasis on you and start putting the emphasis on the audience. Stop putting the emphasis on your products and services and start putting the emphasis on what problems can you solve to demonstrate your expertise. "Oh, but if I solve their problems, they won't need me." I get thousands of messages every single week that would defy that logic. Why? Because I literally give away 98% of my content. I give it away. You can watch all of my programs in 2-minute slots. Yet I still have people lining up to go to Nail It and Scale It, to the Accelerator, to K2 Elite. Why? Because they want that support.
Yeah, and beyond that too, Kerwin, yes, they could get what you're saying, but we know that those kinds of experiences, those go and attend experiences, they have to hear it and then filter it through what applies to their business. And it's that container that creates change, which is why I'm such a stand for in-person events. I get we live in a digital world and I have digital programs, but nothing for me is as powerful as
nothing
beats
a live event.
Time commitment. So I have to say,
but the point that I'm making, and I don't want to escape that, is everybody's worried that if they give too much away, that people won't want to buy their stuff, and it's just not true.
Yes, I actually thank you for what you just shared, because a lot of it really hit home for me personally as well, because I've been in business for a long time too, 20 years this year. And
wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. But the point about that is a lot of my business rules or my marketing strategies, which help me build businesses, are outdated. I didn't grow up with social media, you know what I mean? And so
I get it.
I have been making a lot of the mistakes that you talk about, and particularly in one that I want to share with you, just to have your thoughts on it. I'm really comfortable talking. In fact, I'm a trained speaker. I speak from stage. Group facilitation is my jam. That's what I love more than anything, lights me up. And I sometimes just, when I say can't be asked, when it comes to doing a story, one, I can't be asked.
Yes.
Two, it's not even about being asked as in I don't care about people, because I genuinely do. It's actually what runs through my head is they won't find that interesting. If I'm really honest, I'm sharing from where I'm at.
Please.
I feel like they'll already know that. And then I'll have conversations with people. They're like, "Marina, what you said, that was really interesting." And I'm like, "Oh, was it?" Like it's like a part of me doesn't recognize that sometimes the little thing is actually a big thing to someone. So I'm like, "Oh, it's not valuable enough to share." I don't know if that comes up for other people, but that's what comes up.
It does. It's called the curse of knowledge. You think just because you know something, it's not very important or it's not valuable to somebody else.
That's it. You just hit the nail on the head. It's like, and also as we grow, right, I've noticed that things that I now presume people know, and then people will say it like it's a massive aha, and I'm like, "Oh shit, they didn't know that." And I didn't know that they didn't know that. So sometimes that's a thing for me. So I
It's a
just need
thing
to
for a
get
lot of
over
people.
myself. Okay,
And
cool.
but it's also understanding the context of each feature. Like stories is the perfect example that most people they misunderstand. And what I find really interesting is like I'm the same with stories. I know I should do stories, and I'm always bugging my team to produce more stories so I don't have to do more live stories. But here's what I know: any day of the week. Do you know the most powerful type of content to put on your stories?
Just your life.
It's behind the scenes.
Yeah. And
Because
the private part of me I'm like, no,
I
I
get
don't
it.
want
I get it. Because I used to put everything out there. Man, I put my divorce on a documentary series,
to.
The social experiment. And so I'm used to putting everything out there. And I've got to a stage in my life now I'm like, you know what? There's not as much stuff I want to put out there. That said, when you look at main feed is about capturing a moment in time. Main feed, and we're talking Instagram here. Main feed is about maybe capturing a 2 or a 3 minute video of context and content. Same as YouTube, same as Facebook. But stories gives people a perspective that is different to the main feeds. And that's what we've got to understand. Stories is contextualized to be that little bit. It's because when you look at stories, it's behind the feed. It's behind the scene of the feed, and that's what people want to see. And they don't have to see. And I know you've got a personal life, but I'm pretty sure I just saw you doing a pose naked on a rock on Instagram.
But I'm not naked. But yes, I'm naked. Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe you've got it. What do you call it? Photoshopped out. But you don't have to give everything away, and I think that's probably the most important part, because if you don't give everything away, then people want to know more. But if you just give enough away, like, because if you're willing to take a photo of yourself at the base of a waterfall after a beautiful big hike, why not spend 2 minutes just saying, "Oh my God, I've just here I am slugging away."
And
I
it's
think
just the habit, isn't it? It's the
it
habit
is a
too
habit.
of
It
getting
is,
into
and
it
I'm
because
talking to myself right here because I'm fucking so bad at this at the moment. So
yeah.
I get it. I do.
Yeah, and I do. I think that certain and it's a story, and I'm happy to own that it's a story. But it's like the idea of just capturing the little moments. And yet, it is true what you say, because there are people that I follow that I probably, when I started following them, would never have thought I would ever buy something from them. Like I just followed because I was like, oh, I'm just curious, how do they do their thing? And because of the stories, I liked them. And then because I liked them, when they offered something around, I clicked on the sales page, which previously, I would never have thought to do
That
because I didn't
speaks
really
volumes.
like their brand. Yeah, but then I liked the person. So yeah, that's awesome. So, and it's probably valuable for people to realize too, right? That if they just stay consistent, because this is what I heard
Oh,
with
it's so
what you said
important.
is provide value, um, provide service, don't just sell. But you also said, like, be consistent. These points of contact are important, and the people are not. We often think, or I often think, so I'm sharing again, that, oh well, I said that before, or they probably saw that last week. But I don't see everyone's stories, and everyone doesn't see my stories. So
Yeah.
there's value in being repetitive, isn't there? And
Well,
consistent in that
that's how you
repetition.
build a brand,
Yeah, right.
because if you're saying something different all the time, you don't become a McDonald's by everyone associating a different search term with the word fast food. Oh, sorry, a different product. They own the term fast food because they've created a level of consistency around their brand and their market message. Same with Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
If you look at Gary Vaynerchuk, he's a perfect example of this. I followed Gary for quite a while, and when I stopped following Gary, it's not because I do still follow him. I just don't consume his content anymore. And the reason being, he's saying the same thing over and over and over. It's just a different video, same shit, different day. And there's nothing wrong with that. But he even says this himself. It's it's not about repeating yourself. It's about being consistent. And I know for me, that's probably a drawback for me, because I'm saying the same thing every day, but I'm not just talking about business. I'm talking about parenting. I'm talking about mental health. I'm talking about ADHD, dyslexia, addiction, PTSD, OCD, a whole range of other acronyms as well. And for me, it's a lot harder for me to create a particular keyword or phrase, because I do talk on a range of different subjects. But for everyone else, if you've got a particular niche, just keep talking about it, keep banging on.
Yeah, I often feel the same.
20 exposures.
So, for someone who is looking to you and is inspired by you, what would you say, looking at your career, was it just consistency, and building out a team? Like, how did you get to be someone who would speak with the likes of Richard Branson and Tony Robbins? Like, how did you like get so far ahead, if you will, of a lot of other business strategists and speakers and authors and whatnot? Like, what would you say
Well, it
did it
took
for
me
you?
11 years before I could share the stage with Tony. and it's taken me 21 years to get to where I am right now. And the thing is, a lot of people only really have known me since I've blown up on social media. And, you know, since I've blown up on social media, you know, once upon a time I could walk down the street and nobody knew who the hell Kerwin Ray was. Now I walk down the street and, you know, most days that I go out, I'm taking at least 1 or 2 or 3 different photos on the street, which is really nice, but it's just a demonstration of the consistency over time. And people go, oh my God, you know, you've blown up overnight. It's like, well, 21 years is a long time, you know, in the scheme of things.
21-year overnight success. Yeah.
And so for me, yeah, I don't think, look, and I've had this conversation with a few people. I've definitely got a unique set of experiences. You know, and I say this to my partner all the time, you know, because I don't relate the same as everybody else. I don't operate the same as a lot of other people. You know, I've had a disproportionate amount of traumas in my life. I've had a disproportionate amount of, you know, death in my life. I've had a disproportionate amount of stress in my life and a disproportionate amounts of, you know, different levels of labels and dysfunctions given to me in my life. And so I've had to overcome a lot of shit to get to where I am. And, you know, whereas some other coaches, they haven't necessarily come from the same place. And I think that's probably one of my biggest points of difference is I am someone that a lot of people can relate to because I have, you know, I've been through addiction. I've been through ADHD. I've been through dyslexia, OCD, SPD. I'm on the spectrum. You know, I've lost friends. I've had friends murdered. I've, you know, had my own set of experiences in a range of different situations that when I talk about them openly and freely with levels of humility and vulnerability, people go, oh man, he's just like me. Or, oh man, he's just like one of my mates. And so as a result, I think that experience says a lot, you know, or I think that experience gives a lot that not necessarily everyone can replicate through going to a seminar.
Yeah. And well, what I hear there is, and it's something that I really value generally in myself and I think is critical to our growth is grit, you know, and grit comes from resistance, right? Grit comes from the challenges. So meaning the challenges you've had have been, have kind of set you up for success, because I feel, and what I'm hearing and what you just shared is that so often it's our complacency. Like if we're super comfortable, we're not motivated to move or to create change or whatever else. So
Correct.
What would you say, given your unique set of circumstances, has been the most transformational tool, lesson, experience? Like what would you, if you were like, you know what, that was pivotal? And I'm sure there are many, but if you could distill it.
Is. You know, it's like, what's the magic bullet? There's about, you know, there's 53 magic bullets. I'd say the most important work that I've ever done and that has given me the biggest bang for my buck is self-awareness. Because if you look at self-awareness, or, you know, you could label over that becoming more conscious, the more I get to know who I am, the easier it is for me to work with me.
Yeah.
You know, the more I understand what my values are, the easier it is for me to make sure that I can link the things that need to be done to the things that are already important to me. You know, it's like playing a computer game. If you don't know what button does what, you're going to look like, you know, you're not going to be able to play a good game. Whereas the more you know what the joystick does, the more you know what buttons do and what buttons can do in combination, the more potential you've got for a range of different moves. And you know, it's interesting because I was talking about this the other day. I'm someone, you know, I said before, I can be quite a solitary animal. I'm someone that enjoys large amounts and large periods of time by myself. You know, after my divorce with my ex-wife, you know, there was a 4.5 year period there. Whereas if I had a holiday for 2 weeks and I didn't have my son, I may not have seen there were a number of periods where I wouldn't have seen another human being for 7 to 10 days. I wouldn't have even left the house. And not because I was depressed, because I'm just happy by myself. And that's been a consistent theme over my entire life. And I'm not kidding when I say this. I've literally spent years by myself. And when you do that, you get to know a lot about the person that you're spending time with. You know, and I've had people say, well, isn't that lonely? And I say, well, it would be if I was alone, but I'm not. You know, when you know who you are, you're never going to be alone. And I know that might sound cliche or even a little bit, you know, a sprinkle of cheddar, but to me it's true, because the more I know about who I am, the more I know how to point myself in different directions and do whatever it takes to do whatever I need to do.
No, I love that's your answer. I love that's your answer. And I think, well, wherever you go, you take yourself with you, right? So there's no escaping you. So you may as well come into a place of wholeness and acceptance. And it sounds like that's what you've done. And it's equally shone through your brand and magnetized people to you, because I think that's what everyone's seeking. So just to finish up, Kerwin, some rapid fire questions.
Go.
Your favorite book, number one book?
Oh, it's a tough one.
Yeah, you can name three. How about that?
Okay, the holographic universe would be one. The um, not Think and Grow Rich. What's it called? Yeah, Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill would be another one, and The Way of the Superior Man.
All really good books. Awesome. We'll link to them. And then, what would be your advice for someone who's listening, your hack to access more energy, like in the day, like if they just want more energy?
Just being really clear on what. Well, okay. There's actually I'll give you a physiological hack here. Like I fast. I don't eat for 18 hours every day. I drink a liter of water upon waking every morning. I meditate most mornings for between 45 minutes to 2.5 hours. I exercise 3 times a week. I do yoga twice a week. And for me, physical energy is a really important component of performance, because if you don't have fuel in the tank, then the motor's just not going to run. And no matter, how good the motor is, if it's got no fuel, it's not going to move.
Love it. And what would be your number one tip, hack, or advice for someone who wants to have a greater sense of empowerment? They want to feel more empowered within themselves.
Great question. And I think this part is often very much overlooked. Keep your commitments. I think the reason that so many people deal with such levels of low self-worth and self-esteem is they can't keep a commitment. And I'm not talking necessarily about to other people. I'm just talking about to themselves, which may be to somebody else. But most people hand out commitments like it's a paper currency and they don't follow through. And we all know, if someone asks us to do something and we don't do it, it's because we don't value that person or we don't value what they've asked us to do. And if we're making a commitment to ourselves and we're not, and again, most people would make 10 commitments, I'm going to do this, and they don't do anything. And all that does is erode self-worth. Whereas if you make one promise to yourself every day and you commit and you do whatever it takes to follow through on that promise, and you do that for 6 weeks, I guarantee you'll feel better. Then you go to 2 promises a day. And to me, I've got my philosophy is my word is my bond. My son will say that as well. Our word is our bond. We do what we say we'll do. If you say you're going to do it, you bloody well do it.
I love that. And that's such a foundation of sovereignty is self-trust. So I think that's what you're kind of talking about there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And most of us just don't trust ourselves, which is also potentially why we're afraid to step into the unknown, So I love that. Last question. Well, it's actually second last question.
Go for it.
One more question, rapid fire, is what would you suggest for people to experience the sensation of more fulfilled expression? So whether this is in relationship or around their purpose, stepping out into the world, being seen, what would be your advice around how to experience elevated expression?
Look, a good place to start is with what I would call radical honesty, because I think one of the things that prevents people from expressing themselves is fear. And so oftentimes people will augment or filter or throttle their expressions because they're afraid of what people will think. If you want to say something, say something. If you want to dance naked in the street in the rain, dance naked. Do what's honest for you. And that's where for me, like I'm a Libran, so I'm a Libran tiger, so I'm all about balance and I'm all about justice. But truth is a really important part of my existence. And one of the things that I've learned, the more honest I am in my expressions, my physical expressions, my intimate expressions, my intellectual expressions, the more honest I am in my expressions, the better I feel, and just the more I am able to do, and the more capacity I feel I'm able to give. And so for me, just be honest in your expressions. I think there's a disproportionate level of people that just aren't willing to be honest with themselves and those around them in how they express themselves.
Yeah, and I think you're right, for fear of not being approved of. Abandonment wounds. Yeah. So last question. If the entirety of this podcast got deleted, and if there was only literally the next sentence from Kerwin Ray for the rest of the world to hear as your truth bomb or your billboard statement, it's kind of like, hey team, of all the things I've learned, which is many, this is kind of really important. Just remember this. And it would be, no pressure, it's
no pressure. Don't fuck it up. Be deliberate, not desperate.
Oh, nice. Is that a mantra of yours?
It's actually one of our values. It's one of our values. Be deliberate, not desperate.
Awesome. Well, there, enough said. Kerwin, thank you so much for your time today. This has just been so full of juiciness and wisdom. And I just wanted to say, thank you for the man that you be in the world and the work that you do. But, who we be is so much more important in our legacy and in our ripple effect in the world. So thank you for being you. I think that you do an exceptional job at it. And you embodying your wholeness with such authentic acceptance is in and of itself a resonance that gives other people access to their
Thank
own
you.
wholeness. So yeah.
I've really enjoyed this, and I feel like, as I said at the beginning, I feel like this is a long time coming. I know I reached out to you a long time ago, so it's taken us a while to get here, but here we are. So thank you for having me.
And it's my pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Namaste, brother. Thank you.
Namaste, namasko.
Bye.